All right. So when when building equivalent fractions, a good idea would be to begin with fractions that are unit fractions. So stick to one half, one third, one fourth, and so forth. Try to stay away from two thirds and three fourths initially because we first want students to really understand relationships, right? So I'm gonna just work with fractions that we work in third and fourth grade, which is one half, one third, one fourth, one sixth, one eighth, and one twelfth. Notice I'm not going to work with one fifth. That is not part of a third grade standard, nor is one seventh and one ninth. Those are not part of third nor fourth grade. So that's why it's important for us to read our standards. So let me build some of these fractions initially. So, all right. So I've built those fractions here. And let me put my one half on top. So I'm going to shade in one half. And I want to ask my students, well, let's build some equivalent fractions here, right? So obviously, if I'm working with thirds, as you can see, thirds is not, I cannot build an equivalent fraction with thirds if I'm working with a half, right? So I'm going to just move that down. If I could, then I'm going to say, can we build equivalent fractions with fours? And student would visually see that, hey, it lines up. So I'm going to leave it there, right? I'm going to do that with sixes. And sure, I can do that as well. I'm going to do that with the eighths. And say, yeah, they can do that. And then with 12s, we can do that as well, right? So here, a question I might ask students is, I have one half here, boys and girls. How many one-fourths do I need to shade in to make them equivalent? Right? And I'm going to give them some time to think, maybe put in the chat box. And I'm hoping that I hear that two one-fourths is the same as one half. And I'm going to ask them the same question. If I have six, it says, how many one-sixths do I need to fill? And I'm hoping that I hear three. So I could say 1-6, 2-6, 3-6. I can even go back to some choral counting ideas that we've been doing, right? And I can ask the next question, how many 1/8s can I use to build the same as one half? And I'm going to have them maybe choral count again. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8 is equivalent to one half. And how many 1/12s? Well, let's count. Ready? 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, 4/12, 5/12, 6/12. So 6/12 is another way that we can represent one half, right? So if I wanted to put a numeric representation, I can go down here in my virtual manipulative where it has the numbers, and then it'll show that one half is the same as 2/4, which is the same as 3/6, which is the same as 4/8, which is the same as 6/12. Another important concept you might want to consider here is that if we look at these all being halves, also that relationship between numerator and denominator. Numerator is half of the denominator, so therefore it's a half, right? 2/4 is half of four, three is half of six, four is half of eight, six is half of 12. By the same token, we can say that half of, for example, if I wanted to do what is, how can I represent half if I'm working with hundreds, then students might understand that it could be 50 100s. Or if I had tenths, and I want students to understand that, how do I represent half in tenths? Well, half of 10 would be 5, right? And it comes from this idea that we previously discussed here, right? So unit fractions is a great way to get started with building equivalent fractions. Another thing I want to consider is I work with halves, right? So let me just get rid of this, and I'm going to just move this to the side and talk about, well, let's work with thirds now, boys and girls. And let's see 1/3. Can I make an equivalent fraction with fourths? No, so those don't. So if I'm working with equivalent fractions, just to build that equivalent fraction, I'm not able to. So I'm going to slide this over here. Can I work with 6? Yes, right? But I'm going to take that off, right? So now I notice that 1/3 is the same as 2/16, right? Can I work with eighths and thirds as building equivalent fractions? And if I line up my eighths, I can see that, hey, they don't line up quite nicely. So therefore, eighths and thirds, I cannot build an equivalent fraction out of that. So I'm going to just sort it out over here. And then I'm going to work with my 12s. And I can see that if I move this, I can see that, yeah, they line up nicely. So I'm going to do a choral count with them and say, you know what? 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, 4/12. And if I want to put a value to it, then I can do this and say, oh, 1/3 is the same as 2/6 is the same as 4/12. Right? Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this video.